the MVP race is wide open. This wasn't the case maybe 3 weeks ago, but Embiid got hurt, and now he's up against his games total. Jokic had a run early on, and now you have newcomers into the conversation, and Luka and Shea. Giannis is still there. I just think at this moment last year, Jokic and Embiid had kind of risen to the top. It became a two-man race, and it was right around now that maybe it was in February where the race kind of tilted in Embiid's favor. We know there was the conversations around that. But this year, I think you look at it, and if any of those guys I just mentioned won it, I wouldn't be surprised. I couldn't have said that in the last couple of years.
And you know what's really interesting about the names you just mentioned? One guy you didn't mention, and it kind of blows me away because I think what they have done from a team standpoint and who they've added actually hurts Jason Tatum's chances to win an MVP.
I think you're right.
Because he's been in the hunt, right? He's gotten votes. He's gotten votes for the last few years. Because Boston's had one of the best records in the league every year. Yep. He's their best player. He's basically a 30-point per night type guy. And I think because now they went out and they added Porzingis, they added Holiday, it's almost like they've given him so much help that now he's viewed like differently, even though his numbers are very similar. And you didn't mention his name. And you know why? Because his name's not being mentioned nationally as an MVP candidate. So I agree with you. I think Embiid had firm control of that thing a few weeks ago. He was playing out of his mind. He went down. And here's the thing, he's got this persistent swelling in his knee. I don't know how much this is going to affect him the rest of the way.
I have 6 teams in a tier that I would say I would not be surprised if they won. That's how I'm defining my most top tier. And it is Boston, Denver, Minnesota, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and the Clippers. If any of those teams won, I would not be surprised. Whereas the next team in that bunch would be the Thunder. And if they won, I would be surprised.
All right. When you say won, you mean won the whole thing?
Yeah, win the championship. We're halfway through, and I have 6 teams.
I don't know if I would go 6 deep on that. I don't know that I can say I wouldn't be surprised if Philly won it. I think that would surprise me if Philly won the whole thing. And then I also probably feel that way about Minnesota. I don't know that I could see Minnesota winning the whole thing.
Really?
I don't know that you go. I don't know that there seems to be a level of progression that typically takes place with this thing. And, to go with from really very little playoff success at all to winning a championship when there's this many quality teams, right? And I think the West is probably deeper in terms of the number of really interesting, relevant teams than we've ever seen. Now, part of that might be, am I holding on to things like the Warriors and the Lakers? And because they look terrible some nights, but it's because of who they are that I'm including them. I'm not sure, but I look at Denver, I look at Minnesota, Oklahoma City, the Clippers, the Pelicans, the Kings, the Mavericks, the Suns. I mean, it's so deep. And so to think Minnesota could traverse that, like all those landmines when they've had very little playoff success at all, that would surprise me. I completely agree with you. I would not be surprised if Boston won it. I'm going to tell you right now, though, I'm starting to get closer to saying I'd be surprised if Milwaukee won it. Like their defense,
I know. It's true.
Night after night. That's why right now for me, I mean, I'm really looking at Boston. I'm looking at Denver, and I actually think the Clippers might be the third team I put on there as the most likely and viable team that I could see winning it. I think I would almost put those 3 teams in a different category. And actually, maybe I just put Boston and Denver alone on the top shelf, and then the Clippers on the second shelf all by themselves, and then a number of teams on the third shelf. I think that's probably how I would do it.
That's an interesting one for me. Minnesota, I just have a lot more faith in, and I just think they're a really good team. You're right about the prove it factor. That's a big one. But teams like the Clippers, outside of Kawhi Leonard, have any of those guys proven it? I mean, we're talking about now you're starting to give Harden and Westbrook and Paul George, they have playoff experience, but not necessarily noteworthy playoff experience. So I don't know. It's an interesting question halfway through. I do think that there's just a lot of teams that are at the very least, you would say you would be only somewhat surprised, rather than completely floored. I think at least, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You might be surprised if Minnesota won it, but you wouldn't be floored. It's not like, If the Houston Rockets won it, you would be floored.
Correct. It's not like they're coming out of nowhere. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I guess I have some skepticism to think that you could take that leap and win 4 rounds, because you're talking about, it would be,
Right.
I assume, for me, Boston at the end of it. But first, you got to get through 3 really difficult rounds in the West, when you haven't really been in that position where you've got to make big shots to close series out. Like, and in those moments, I think there are some question marks around them. And look, would I be, just absolutely jaw hit the floor? No, if they made it to the finals. But if they made all the way to the finals and beat Boston, I think I would be pretty stunned by that. I just think Boston, it looks like their year. And I think it's Boston and Denver. If I had to lay money on it today, I'm expecting to see those 2 teams meet in the finals.
We can go quick on this next one because I don't know how interesting it is. But for me, another thing I feel like I know is that time's up in Atlanta. Atlanta had a nice run to the Eastern Conference Finals a couple years back. They retooled. You pick up DeJounte Murray, but they are currently the 11 seed, right in front of Toronto. I almost put Toronto on this list as another team where the time is up, but I'm just going to stick to Atlanta. They've been rumored to be trying to trade DeJounte Murray. I look at them and I go, they might need a full-on reset, because I don't know that there is a one-move pivot for them. I just think time is up.
I think you're 100% right. And I think the dilemma they have is they have to view their roster in reality. And is Trae Young a winning player? Is Trae Young the kind of guy that you can really win with if he's your best player? And he's that ball dominant and a guard that size, taking that many shots, and the way that he runs his offense. He's obviously super talented and he's very entertaining. Their problem would be, if they make that decision, they want to blow this whole thing up. How do you get somebody that's as box office as Trae Young? Like, that's always something that the organization is worried about. But I just don't think this is a winning formula. And I think, and I don't necessarily know that Trae Young could be the second guy on any team. Right. I just think the way that he plays, it's like his show, his ball, and he could play in Atlanta for 10, 12, 15 years. I know they made the one run to the conference finals, but that shouldn't have happened. Like, they should not have beaten Philadelphia in that series. I mean, with what Ben Simmons, the way he melted down right before our eyes, and Embiid was banged up, he didn't play well. They shouldn't have won that series against the Philadelphia 76ers that year. And they make it to the conference finals, and I think people masked over like how hard it is to win with a guard that size as your predominant shot taker when he's shooting in the low 40s from the field every single year. That is a very difficult way to run your offense, but it was masked over that one year. And I think reality has set in the last couple of years. You're 100% right. I don't think that this thing's going to go anywhere. I don't know where you'd begin to break this down, because I don't know what you do with Trae Young if you wanted to rebuild that way. And as long as you keep him and he plays the same role, unless you put Adam, and I don't know if this will work in the modern NBA, what if you put a team around him that looked a lot like the team Allen Iverson had around him in Philadelphia, right? Which is a bunch of hard-nosed defenders, screen setters, offensive rebounders, right? That's what he played with. His second best offensive player was Aaron McKee that year. And you had a bunch of dudes, Dikembe Mutombo protecting the rim, Eric Snow on the ball defense, and George Lynch's of the world. Like, this is who they surrounded him with. Do whatever you want offensively. We'll protect you defensively. But I don't know that would work in the modern NBA, because of the way the rules are set up. You've got to get to a certain number to win. So I don't know that you can even put that type of team around Trae Young, but you just roll him out there as your best player and play up and down pickup basketball the way the league looks. I just don't think he's going to be efficient enough to give you a chance.
I don't know if we're going to hear it in the next 6 weeks. In fact, I would bet we don't. But I do think in the next 6 months, we start to hear the Trae Young conversation heat up with some trades. I mean, he's already been rumored to the Spurs maybe having interest. So it's already out there a little bit, but I think it'll become a bigger and bigger storyline here, because I think they're stuck where they are. Next big statement I have: offense is dominating more than ever, and kind of at a rate that's almost frightening. Legs, the Sacramento Kings last season had the best offensive rating in the history of NBA. This year, there are 7 teams with a better offensive rating than the Kings had last year. So there are currently 7 record-setting offenses in the NBA. What does that all mean if everybody's doing it? How impressive can it possibly be? But the Timberwolves, who have a 108 defensive rating in 2019, that would have been averaged. I alluded to that earlier. offense is king in the NBA right now. And these offenses are, I mean, we can definitively say that the numbers are now so great that I think everybody is faced with just what an outlier it is that these games are 130 every single night.
Yeah, and it's think about what you're saying with regard to last year's Sacramento Kings team and the number of teams you're talking about this year that are even surpassing that. Look at some of the rosters. You're not talking about teams that are laden with like 4 future Hall of Famers.
Right.
I mean, the Sacramento Kings
Pacers.
have a really, really, it's what I'm saying. The Indiana Pacers. I know Tyrese Halliburton is a great player, right? And he's a great engine. Right. And he scores and facilitates. But look at the rest of the roster. Is that a roster that you think can average 126 points a game in the NBA and have a record-setting, offensive rating? And you can say the same thing about the Kings last year. Yeah, De'Aaron Fox, a really good player, is a perennial all-star caliber guard. Sabonis is not going to overwhelm you with talent, but he comes at you relentlessly, puts up really good numbers every night. And then it's a bunch of role players that were like outcasts from other teams, and they break the record for offensive rating. It's the way the league is designed. It's the number of three-point shots, the way teams are constantly, designed offensively to get those shots. And the pace at which teams want to play and trade baskets, it allows teams that have rosters that wouldn't indicate they would be that good offensively be able to do things that are historic. That's where we're at right now in the league.
I think my next big statement is that the MVP race is wide open. This wasn't the case maybe 3 weeks ago, but Embiid got hurt, and now he's up against his games total. Jokic had a run early on, and now you have newcomers into the conversation, and Luka and Shea. Giannis is still there. I just think at this moment last year, Jokic and Embiid had kind of risen to the top. It became a two-man race, and it was right around now that maybe it was in February where the race kind of tilted in Embiid's favor. We know there was the conversations around that. But this year, I think you look at it, and if any of those guys I just mentioned won it, I wouldn't be surprised. I couldn't have said that in the last couple of years.
And you know what's really interesting about the names you just mentioned? One guy you didn't mention, and it kind of blows me away because I think what they have done from a team standpoint and who they've added actually hurts Jason Tatum's chances to win an MVP.
I think you're right.
Because he's been in the hunt, right? He's gotten votes. He's gotten votes for the last few years. Because Boston's had one of the best records in the league every year. Yep. He's their best player. He's basically a 30-point per night type guy. And I think because now they went out and they added Porzingis, they added Holiday, it's almost like they've given him so much help that now he's viewed like differently, even though his numbers are very similar. And you didn't mention his name, and you know why? Because his name's not being mentioned nationally as an MVP candidate. So I agree with you. I think Embiid had firm control of that thing a few weeks ago. He was playing out of his mind. He went down, and here's the thing, he's got this persistent swelling in his knee. I don't know how much this is going to affect him the rest of the way. And is he going to miss time periodically because of this injury? And as a result, it's opened up now for a number of people to be in the mix. I agree with you. As we sit here now at almost the midway point, it feels a little bit more wide open with the number of guys in the race, maybe a little bit greater than we usually see at this time.
I got two more for you. This one can be quick, but tanking is back. Tanking is back. We just talked about at the top the trade the Wizards made. The Wizards are 7-31, and they made a trade to get worse. Tanking is back in the NBA. The Pistons are tanking. The Charlotte Hornets have had some injuries. They're ready to tank. Memphis, some bad luck for them, and now you're starting to see guys take little rest days. I just think we're going to see tanking, and it'll become a bigger storyline, I think, in the final month of the season when you start to look at matchups and you're thinking, oh my gosh, Memphis is sitting everybody. I just think last year we did not have a tanking problem. This year, we're back to having about 5 teams that are projected to win about 13 games or less, and that is wild.
It's nuts too. I can say this from a fan's perspective. All the teams I've loved my entire life and I have passion for, nobody more so than my Washington football team. I talk about them all the time. I actually just sat through the first time as a fan in my lifetime, a team I rooted for tanking. And it is painful, man. It is painful. They made the decision at about mid-season. They knew there was going to be a coaching change at the end of the year. We lost to the Bears and the Giants twice, right? And now it's like, okay, now we're just going to try to secure the highest pick we can. And we ended up with the number 2 pick in the draft, 5 of the first 100 picks. But I know from a fan's perspective how brutal It was for me this football season when you're turning on games and I lost interest for the first time. I didn't have to watch. I didn't want to watch because we're not trying to win. And that's what I feel like some of these NBA teams, like I know Philly went through it for a number of years and all my friends were fans of that team. And what that must feel like, I'm going, God, that must stink. You got a team you root for and they're not even trying to win. I just experienced it. And there are a number of teams in the NBA. You're 100% right. Their fan bases are going through it right now. The big difference, though, is right now, you don't know what the payoff is with the NBA because of, in the NFL, you tank enough, you're going to get that pick. NBA, you don't know exactly what your pick's going to be. And you don't know who's even coming out. So it's so much more vague when you tank in the NBA what the reward is going to be at the end. You want to tank hard enough in football, you're going to end up with a top 2 or 3 pick, and you're going to get one of the top quarterbacks coming out of the draft if that's what you want. In the NBA, it's vague. I don't know who's coming out. I don't even know what pick we're going to have. I just know we're not trying to win right now. It's a brutal place to be, and I think you're right. There are more teams doing it right now than we've seen in recent years.
The last one I have for you, I think the first round of the playoffs is going to not just be good, I think it's going to be great. And I don't know if I would have said that coming in. Let's look at the top 4 in the West. Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Denver, the Clippers. I think that's going to be the top 4 in the West because I think those are the 4 best regular season teams. But that means you're going to have road games or road teams are going to be the Pelicans, big time upset potential if they play well, the Kings, the Mavericks, the Suns, maybe the Lakers if they get it together. Those are some big upset potential heavy hitters that would go on the road. I mean, Luka Doncic can win a series. KD, Booker, Beal, even though they haven't played well, they could win a series. So I think the first round is going to be great. And then you're talking about Minnesota and Oklahoma City, unproven teams, carrying that 1 or 2 seed label into the first round. There's pressure there. So I just think the first round, that's just the Western Conference. And then if you go to the East, as much as the top of the East is really solid with, Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Miami and the Knicks, one of those teams going on the road in the first round, the Pacers who have had the Bucks' number, I just think you're going to get an upset in each conference in the first round. I think the odds of that are very, very high.
I completely agree. I would almost want to look at the odds on that and lay some money on it because I think there will be a team in each conference with home court advantage that loses in the first round. And I think it's more certain to happen in the West. Because of the teams you're talking about. I mean, if it ended right now, you're talking about the Pelicans, the Kings, the Mavericks, and the Suns going on the road. All win. Okay? Going on the road. Those 4 teams going on the road the first round. Now, you probably have less belief that the Kings could maybe pull off that. But when you look at Dallas with the star power they have, the star power Phoenix has, and the Pelicans having to go on the road in the first round, I think somebody's going to be in trouble, particularly when you got teams at the top, which we talked about at the beginning of the show, that don't have a lot of winning under their belts collectively, right, in the playoffs with Oklahoma City and Minnesota in particular. And now all of a sudden they got a target on them and they're going to host one of the teams I just mentioned. That is like a scary proposition for those teams. Sacramento dealt with it last year as a 3 seed and losing at home in the first round because you get the Golden State Warriors and Steph drops a 50 spot in a game 7. So, I mean, this is dicey. It's going to be dicey for those top teams in the West to all advance.
Yeah. So I like it. I think the playoffs it's too early to really be keying in, but I think they're shaping up to have some really good matchups. And there's a lot of teams, even though there's a handful of taking teams, there's a lot of teams that can make noise in the playoffs this year. And that's why I think it's kind of an exciting year.